takeoff sequence or checklist in the airplane. We're going to check the flaps that are up. The flap indicators on the left side of the instrument panel over here. So we're going to look at, right now the flaps are down, but we would look to see that the indicator is up and that our handle, our flap handle here on the aft bulkhead is to the neutral position. It's got 3 positions: full up, neutral, which is its normal position, and down. And to operate the flaps, we can just go through that. You've got to have your co-pilot grab hold of the handle. He operates the flaps. He will watch the flap indicator, and when you call a quarter flaps, he'll take the handle from neutral. You pull it out to come out of the lock, pull it out and push it down, and then return it to neutral to stop the flaps. That's how that works. Pull it out to unlock it, push it down, bring it back up to stop the flaps. They stop immediately. There's no creep or movement to them after they stop as soon as you return the handle to neutral. So that's how the flaps work. So we need to go through a crew briefing. Typically the pilot would say to the co-pilot, here's the briefing for today's flight. There may be special circumstances involved in the particular flight, the particular runway, the weight of the airplane, the length of the runway, etc. But here's a typical briefing. The pilot says to the co-pilot, guard the throttles behind my hand. Monitor all temperatures and pressures. Call out any discrepancies. If we should have an engine failure before V1, I'll abort the takeoff. If I have an engine failure after V1, I will continue the takeoff. You obey my commands. So what that means is the pilot will have his hand on the throttles at the top. He's controlling the throttles. The co-pilot will guard the throttles, which means he will put his hand on the throttle quadrant below and guard them and hold them wherever the pilot stops. Wherever the pilot stops and sets them, that's where they stay. He doesn't let them move. And the reason is that when we go to rotate or lift off the runway, that is done in a DC-3 with both hands. So the pilot will take his hands off of the throttles and put both hands onto the control yoke at that point. So, alright, we've completed the briefing. We check our flight controls for being free. We'll roll the ailerons lock to lock, left and right. We will move the elevator control full forward, full aft. We'll move the rudder pedal full left, full right. We'll check the trim. And in the DC-3, I kind of prefer 0 or perhaps just a degree nose up for this airplane. We'll check that our propeller controls are in the high RPM setting. We'll check that our trim tabs are set. Trim we have for aileron and rudder. Actually it's rudder here and aileron over here. And the indicators pointing to 0. Typically they can just stay set at 0. Mixtures are in auto lean. Carburetor heat is cold and locked. Fuel selectors are on the left main and on the right main. We've looked at the vacuum for the flight instruments. Should be indicating in somewheres probably 3 or 4 inches at idle. We've set our gyros. We've got 3 sets in here to the proper heading that the compass indicates. And we've checked our temperatures and pressures. Next is we're going to pull the side windows open, and the co-pilot and the pilot are going to turn around, stick their heads out, and make sure that we have no oil leaking from our oil coolers. In cold temperatures, it's possible that without knowing it, the oil cooler control valves, which are automatic in this airplane, could have malfunctioned and allowed heavy, thick oil to go into the oil coolers, which would burst, or has the potential for bursting them. So we want to look out and make sure that we don't have a burst oil cooler and we're dripping oil all over the taxiway there before we go for our takeoff. We've checked and they're dry. we would turn on our pitot heaters, which are here. We've got two, a left one and a right one in the overhead console. If atmospheric conditions warranted turning them on, for instance, there's precipitation out there and the temperature's close to freezing, or we know it's going to be immediately after climb, we're going to turn them on. And we check our alcohol quantity to make sure that we've got enough alcohol to de-ice our carburetors and our propeller blades. Alcohol is up here in the center, right in the nose, centers on if we think we're going to be entering into icing conditions. Alright, we're ready for takeoff. We've got clearance from the tower. We're going to roll into position. I'm going to unlock the tail wheel, advance the throttles and move into position, line up on the runway, and again it's kind of a rolling turn and lock the tail wheel. It's a matter of just pulling the handle out of the lock and letting it spring load forward to the locked position. We're going to check our cowl flaps and make sure that they're in the trail position. In trail position, the cowl flaps are on the right hand side, and that would always be the co-pilot's job. Cowl flaps have multiple positions: open, off, trail, off, and closed. When we put them in the trail position, that means that they're in a free-wheeling circuit, if you will. It means that there's no hydraulic pressure being applied to them, either to push them towards open or push them towards closed. And the airflow that goes through the engine cowling and exits will compensate for the position of the cowl flaps. In other words, they're floating. There's air going around the outside of the engine, acting on the cowl flaps, trying to push them shut. There's air going in the front of the engine cowling, just like in the front of a jet intake would be a good way to explain that. It's flowing around the cylinder cooling fins, and it has to exit somewhere, so it exits around the cowl flaps. That air is trying to force them open. So the two air pressures act to differentiate the cowl flaps and move them in one direction or other. And as we start out, they'll be in a very open position, but as we continue down the takeoff roll, the air pressure will tend to, on the outside, will tend to close them, and they'll come to a what is called trail position, and they'll stay there. So the cowl flaps are on trail. We'd turn on both fuel boost pumps. We'd move our mixtures to auto rich. We'd make sure our throttle friction lock is set. Our tail wheel is locked. And at this point we could turn on our no smoking and our seatbelt signs for our passengers. Now we're ready for the takeoff roll.